Welcome back. Here we are, Napoleon at Leipzig. We're doing the next scenario in the Grand Campaign. We finished up the October 14th scenario, the Battle of Leibert-Volkwitz. If you haven't watched that yet, I highly recommend you go watch that on the channel. I'll leave a little thing up here for you to click through to that. And the reason I say that is because this is going to be a direct continuation of the action that we had around Leibert-Volkwitz in this section of the Battle of Leipzig as we enter the October 16th scenario, which is the Battle of Wachau and Möchern, which is kind of battles that took place up here and down here as the continuing engagements went forward. We are playing the Grand Campaign, meaning we are linking all the scenarios together, and that is why you see a ton of counters on the map. You can see, if you watch that first video, you know that there wasn't nearly this much stuff, especially up here in the north, happening at the end of that October 14th day. But let me go over what you are seeing here and what we're about to start. So the Battle of Möchern and Wachau, which is the scenario, is going to last from 9 a.m. Well, it's actually going to last from 6 a.m. On the 16th of October to 6 p.m. of 16th of October. So we've got a 12-hour period here. Now, 3 of those hours are going to be condensed into the first night turn, but the game is going to start with a night turn, a very early dawn turn, we'll call it. There is going to be some movement and some marching with some of these particular formations. If you remember from the last video, we came very close to taking the village of Leibert-Volkwitz here with Lindenau's Austrians who have engaged. We're engaged basically all day against the French up here. The Russians forming up under Barclay to try and push in this direction, but being driven off by Victor's artillery. And then we had some Austrians, Mirwildt's second corps coming up from the reserve. We had the Austrian Reserve Corps under Hamburg coming up from this direction. Poniatowski ended up eliminating a bunch of Prussians in the coalition. But unfortunately, he was being outflanked very quickly by Russian K Corps, who was coming up from the south here based on some cards that we drew that allowed them to enter the map in this general area rather than having to come up this road here. So it's looking like an envelopment situation, and the French are likely going to have to pull back. Now, a couple of things as we start this scenario that you should know about. First of all, at the start of this scenario, we were forced to put destroyed bridges on a lot of these crossings of this particular river, which is the Place River coming up here. And I guess we are to assume that the French sabotaged and blew a lot of these crossings in the times that some of this battle was happening. There were no counters to do that, although we could have blown bridges manually if we had wanted to, and we did, in fact, here near Grobern. But these start the scenario in play, and actually this has a really interesting effect here because many of the crossings that the Austrian reserve in particular could have used to outflank Poniatowski here have been destroyed. So here the bridge is blown across a river and a stream, a bridge blown here at Gashwitz. We've got bridges blown or burned, I guess, up here across the Place near Losnig, near Konowitz. Basically making the transition up north towards Leipzig itself very difficult for the coalition. There are still a few crossings remaining. There's this crossing here across the river near Dölitz. But in order to get there, the Austrians are going to have to move up. And up to this point at the end of the last scenario, they were concentrating on trying to push Poniatowski off of Grobern, because that is victory points underneath him. Now he may just have to withdraw there in general, but these bridges being destroyed have interrupted what the Russians were trying to do here under Constantine. In fact, one of the Russian light cav actually got out in front and is now cut off from the rest of the formation because of these bridge destructions. The Russians, if you remember, were marching up here towards Lindenau, where we've got Nansuti sort of lightly holding that position. And the Russians, part of the Russian corps was coming up this direction. Part of the Russian corps, I was trying to avoid a traffic jam, was coming up this direction, and part of it was cutting across here. It was a game of traffic management. Unfortunately, we've got some units that have gotten across the river but are now cut off. And in order to reach this, they're going to have to go probably this direction, but they're going to be extremely vulnerable. On top of that, because of the speed of the cavalry march from Constantine's sort of vanguard, you can see that the baggage train for K Corps is here. They have also outrun their supply. So when we check weather on the first turn of this scenario, a lot of these forward units are going to be out of supply. Now, that's not a huge deal because being out of supply just puts you under demoralization. And that just means that you won't be able to advance after combat for the most part. And a lot of these cavalry units would not be doing attacks by themselves anyways. They would be forming up in this general area, waiting for the rest of the corps to approach. So I don't know necessarily how impactful that is going to be, but it's certainly that unit there has got to be very careful. Now, the good news for the coalition is that we're starting this scenario with some new reinforcements here coming from the west, who are forming up here at Markronstadt. We have got Liechtenstein's 1st Light Cav Corps, it looks like, or 1st Light Corps, I believe. And then we've got Gyulai's 3rd Austrian Corps. They are going to be, they've starting on the map here. They've come up this road. They are now suddenly going to have Nansudi in a really bad position. They're going to be able to march up this highway and try and take Lindenau from him. So the French are going to have to respond to that somehow. And it's going to be difficult. There's not a lot of force here, but there's enough to make his job very hard as the Russians continue the advance. So Nansudi can't really leave this position to counterattack or try some more bridge destruction, because then he just opens the way for the Austrians over here to potentially come in there. We've got a 3 and a 4 initiative, so they'll be activating enough that he's got to be careful. On top of that, we've had Blucher come in the north with the Silesian army. All of these Prussian units here are under the command of York's 1st Corps, but Blucher is with him. Somewhat ahistorically, the French, because they had sort of the knowledge of foresight of where this army was going to approach, the French have actually set up in a pretty good position here. They've kind of got this sort of U-shaped defense going on along this fortified line. Historically, the French actually fortified here between this town and this town, with some units sort of out here, but they had a huge battery of guns facing in this direction for the approaching Prussians. The French here have decided to take a more forward position because they want to take advantage of some of these defensive terrain. And it actually, I didn't plan this, but it actually became very good that Latour's 1st Cavalry Corps ended up moving a little further to the west at the end of the last scenario, because now Blucher has got sort of this wide frontage that he's got to be very careful about, where he's got cavalry units on his left flank. He's got the French Old Guard here at Rodefeld, which is a victory point town, that could potentially come down this road. And then he's got the 6th Corps, the 6th Corps with Napoleon here, all set up in sort of this advanced this sort of like forward position. There's a light cavalry division down here holding this town. We've got this battery of guns on this ridge that are going to be able to fire. So Blucher in a very precarious position as well. He's got to watch all of his flanks. He is also under some specific rules about this particular Prussian grouping of units, and that is all of them have to stay within 4 hexes of Blucher, I believe. Otherwise, they become out of supply. And I have to double check to see if this supply train is on the map. But there are some supply restrictions around this. So these Prussians, the Silesian army, can't just go out and form a big line to protect their left flank and try and flank around. They have got to be really tight, and they've got to be really circumspect about what they're doing and how they're going to do it. So it's going to be a bit limited here in terms of what the Prussians are able to accomplish moving in this direction, especially with so many French forces in the area. I mean, we've also got the Young Guard down here, and we've got more units, French units, I think more Young Guard units coming down this way. We've got elements of the 4th Corps entering the map here. So it's kind of a tall order for Blucher to take. Well, what he's really after here is he's after Möchern, which is here, victory points, but it's going to be tough to get there without getting fully surrounded because of what's happened here with Latour. All right, all that is to say, we've got a really interesting situation. Now, the final thing I want to point out here, well, 2 final things I want to point out here. There's another corps, and this is Macdonald's 4th Corps that starts on the map in this particular scenario. They were not on the map when we left Liebert-Volkwitz in the last video, but they start this scenario under a march order coming down this highway, this road, and they are ordered to go to Holzhausen and then march to Klein-Pesna here. Don't know if I'm saying that properly. Germans can correct me. Now, this whole strung out corps might wind up over here, basically, and that would sort of seal off this right flank from any potential chicanery from the coalition trying to come up this way through some of this flat ground. However, I do have the option, so there's a card in the deck that would allow this march order to be canceled, and I can send Macdonald's corps elsewhere. I can also voluntarily cancel this march order on the coalition, the French turn, on the French turn, and have them do something else. I have to think about what I would want them to do. There's a lot of units here, but if I cancel the march order, it might be worth my while to send them over this direction and take up a line along the river so that the Russians can't get across, and I would be protecting the main entrance on the east side of the Partha River and Plisa rivers from entering Leipzig itself. So there's some flexibility here with this huge corps that the French can actually use to great effect. We'll have to see how the first turn goes and what happens down here around Liebert-Volkwitz and what kind of push the coalition's able to get towards some of these soft locations. But you know, there's a lot of stuff to consider going on as we start this. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is the cards. We're going to be getting cards again. It's going to be a 3-card hand per side. However, because the French had such a dominating victory in the first scenario of the campaign, they're going to get 3 bonus cards. So for this particular scenario, the French are going to have a hand of 6, and the coalition are going to have a hand of 3, which is going to be very significant when it comes to what kinds of movement they're trying to get, what kinds of events they can play. And I think that the French are going to be trying to push that advantage as much as they can, because as long as they can win these scenarios, it's going to be increasingly more difficult for the coalition to win the Battle of Leipzig as we are playing it. So that's where we stand. I will probably not check in every hour like I did with the Battle of Liebert-Volkwitz. We do have some reinforcements coming on. Specifically with the coalition, we've got Langeron's L Corps, we've got Sakin's OS Corps, and we've got St. Priest's 8th Corps, all of whom are going to be coming in. The French, really no reinforcements. There's elements of 3rd Corps here that are going to be coming on with a baggage train at the 11 a.m. hour, but that's really it. So what the French have is what they have. The coalition is going to get stronger over the course of this scenario, but they are going to have to make a lot more progress and do a lot better than they did in Liebert-Volkwitz if they want to stand a chance to win the campaign, it feels like. So we'll see what happens. I think really the key is going to be what happens with this grouping here and what they're able to do with Nansuti's guard units here, and how that's going to force the French to reposition, potentially bringing this corps over in support. So lots to unfold. We're going to get started. Thank you for joining me. This is Napoleon at Leipzig. We are on to scenario number 2 in the Grand Campaign. The sun has dawned on the battlefield for the Battle of Leipzig at 9 a.m. here, and it's just been absolute chaos in just the first half of the turn for the coalition. Let me just take you through some of the key things that happened. So first of all, Kleist was managed to recover one of his cavalry units. The Prussians are trying to regroup. The Russians made an attack here, pushed back some of the French defenders under what was formerly Logistical Corps. And finally, the Austrians did manage to take Liebert-Volkwitz on this turn. They managed to push out the French defenders there. That's 10 points for the Austrians, which is going to be hugely consequential if they can hold it for the rest of the scenario. But in this particular section of the map, the French do need to actually pull back at this point. The Russians have made some more progress up this way. The Austrians are getting ready to try and repair some of these bridges to come around this direction. So the French need to pull back to a more stable perimeter. And in the face of some of these small victories from the coalition. Now, the one thing I did want to showcase here on this side was it was not a good turn for leaders. Blucher did launch an attack here along the river. You can see a lot of the Prussians here, York's corps coming in, eliminated an artillery unit, pushed back while this light cavalry disengaged as the French 6th falls back a little bit to get to better defensible ground. However, Blucher himself took an artillery salvo from this unit here on this ridge as his army approached. Got a suppression result on Blucher and the cavalry unit he's stacked with. And then, because there was a result on the bombardment table, had to roll for Blucher to see if he was captured. And, well, it turns out that the 1 in 6 chance of Blucher being captured meant that he was captured. So, on the very first opening engagement of the first turn, Blucher's been eliminated from this scenario, and likely from the game, really, which is devastating for this entire wing, because now none of these units are within 4 hexes of Blucher. Unless I can get the baggage train card that brings the baggage train on here, everyone's out of supply. That means no advancing after combat. That means it's demoralized effects, and it's going to be that way because Blucher's not coming back. He is an officer, and the French are going to hang on to him. Or a commander, I guess. So just horrible luck. I couldn't believe it when I rolled it. It was the second leader 6 that I rolled this turn, and Blucher didn't even get a chance to light his pipe as the French artillery that Napoleon put here just unloaded on him. We did get more reinforcements coming in. This is Langeron's L Corps coming in. They're headed here. But again, doesn't matter because Blucher, well, it matters, but with Blucher gone, all of these guys are going to be out of supply. Not good. Really not good. The other leader who suffered some ill effects. So we talked a little bit about this Russian cavalry unit who outran his supply. Red blocks, red cubes, by the way, mean the units are out of supply. He managed to cross the river here, and right after the morning march, or the early AM night turn, Nansuti, who's commanding all of these guard units down here, is actually not stacked with a unit, and I did not anticipate this cavalry unit getting so close, but this cavalry unit in the early wee hours of the morning managed to cross this trestle here and get next to Nansuti. And when he is in a zone of control of an enemy, you have to check to see what happens to him. Again, 1 in 6 chance that he's captured, 5 in 6 chance that he just retreats to a friendly unit. Of course, I rolled a 6, not sure about these dice, and that means Nansuti also captured, meaning all these units down here are now going to be in real big danger of Russian attack. Speaking of Russian attack, I forgot to make one here with this artillery unit, so I need to do that. But as you can see, chaos starting to unfold, and without Blucher, I suspect that the coalition is going to have a real big issue with winning not only this scenario, but this campaign. Nothing much to report on this one. The French in the process of pulling back closer to the city. We finally got Poniatowski able to get up the road. Augereau's corps here. I'll zoom in so you can see. Trying to hold the village and citadel at Konowitz, as these bridges are blown, and Kellerman took up a spot here on the last viable crossing on the approach. As Schwarzenberg's Austrians managed to repair these trestles across the river, and they're headed up this way. Held an anchoring force here just to keep Poniatowski honest, but the Austrians are going to come up here. They're going to try and maybe fight their way through Kellerman, or if they can, get this pontoon train in position to maybe cross here at Markleberg for 5. We'll see how it goes. But otherwise, not a lot of action this hour. As you can see on the front, the French just slowly pulling back, making it difficult. There's been some artillery exchanges in here, forced to retreat on Wittgenstein, who was all set up to do an assault to take this hill this turn, and he was not able to get there because of the heavy French artillery shelling. He was pushed back. We'll try again next turn, but this is really a keystone location here on this hill where Victor has got his artillery. If the Russians can, and even maybe Kleist and the Prussians can drive them off that hill, this line will have to fall back a lot further. So they're really trying to make that happen before it gets too late in the day, and then obviously Klenau was out of command last turn, but trying to make preparations to take back Liebert-Volkwitz, which the French managed to recapture. Otherwise, it's been just kind of a slow going. We've got Langeron coming on. We had some skirmishing in here between the Prussian line and the French defenders. Really just everyone getting set up for what is supposed to be, or what is going to be a larger battle. I'll show you the cards that were played. Unfortunately, the coalition had to play alternate reinforcements. They had a really crappy hand, and it was the best of any options, but it is -3 victory points. That was good news because it's going to bring on a huge stack of Bülow's Prussians. However, the French then immediately followed that up with delay one enemy force, and they delayed that force by 5 turns. So Bülow is going to enter the scenario, but not till the end. Good timing for the French there, and right now it just seems like all the breaks are going the way of the French as this battle continues, although it is going to get dicey when the Russians, who are a few turns away from the gates of Leipzig itself, arrive in force. Bit of a critical moment here in the morning of this particular part of the battle. The lines of contact are still in the process of being formed, and it's a bit messy elsewhere, but this general area here is where, around Wachau, is where a majority of the action has been taking place. So Wittgenstein finally took this hill from Victor, displacing his artillery, and because of that, on the French side of the turn, Murat here is commanding a counterattack. He's ordered the French, parts of Victor's corps and parts of what used to be Lochiston's 5th Corps, Lochiston 5th Corps, to come down off the heights and to do a counterattack on this position that Wittgenstein has just taken. The goal here is to try and break the Russians at this part of the battlefield. If he can do that, it would be pretty devastating to the approach from the south. And so Murat feels like it's a low downside, high upside potential here, and so he's going to go for it. So I'm going to roll up these combats. The way this is going to work out, we've got some light cavalry skirmishing here between two basically equal units. I'm just trying to get a hopeful, not hopeful, I'm just trying to get some sort of retreat against this unit to free up this area and weaken Klenau's left flank and Wittgenstein's right flank. In the meantime, we've got combined arms in these two stacks attacking Wittgenstein himself, and then Victor is attacking basically the victorious hilltop units. And the goal here is to push them back off. There is a French unit here who is out of command, who is throwing zones of control. So it's going to be very nasty if this succeeds for the Russians. So let's roll it up. Okay, well, a pretty successful attack by the French. They managed to take the hill here. These two units, unfortunately, were forced to retreat, and they could not, given the control of Golden Gosa here by this unit. So these are going to be eliminated, awaiting recovery. That is 8 strength points to the Russian first. Let's see where that puts them in terms of demoralization. The French light cavalry skirmish here didn't go so well. It allowed the Russians to advance here after the combat, and then Wittgenstein himself managed to repulse elements of that 5th Corps. It was a bloody hand-to-hand affair, but both forces still standing. So the Russians did not collapse like the French wanted, but there were some losses caused, and the French did take some ground back on that hill. I anticipate this particular part of the battlefield is going to be a hot spot for a little while longer. Wittgenstein's probably going to want to commit his forces at this point to make sure that it doesn't turn into a rout, because the French definitely have the numerical advantage at this particular juncture. But Kleist, if he can get organized, can come up here on the left as Poniatowski is withdrawing, and we'll have to see how it unfolds. Well, what is unfolding here as we begin the 2 p.m. turn is a bit of a stalemate, although I would say the French are getting the better of the coalition when it comes to the hand-to-hand or close combat. Every time the coalition is able to make some sort of advance or some sort of gain, the French are able to punch back twice as hard. That was the case here in Liebert-Volkwitz, where Klenau again took the town, and again Lauriston's, formerly Lauriston's 5th Corps was able to counterattack with help from Pahol. Actually, some of the cavalry came down here. Yeah, it's been real tough going for the coalition. Now that's the close combat. So and then another actually Kleist. Now that he's managed to get moving, he managed to try and put some pressure on Poniatowski as he was trying to withdraw, pin him down for a bit. And Poniatowski's counterattack was equal to or better than what Kleist was able to muster. So again, the coalition having trouble getting any sort of leverage, but. Yeah, it's when it comes to the close combats, the French are just superior right now. The dice are just going the French's way, and it's just really hard to build any sort of momentum. So that's kind of where we are. Meervelt has sort of set up a position here as this coalition 11th Corps started to stretch the flank. We've also got some Russian units out here. The one thing I will say is that when it comes to artillery, the coalition guns are a lot better than the French's in this particular situation right now. You've got just absolutely hammering fire coming down the line here. You've got 6 points here, you got 6 points here, you got 6 points here. And so the French, even though they're winning these close combats, and, these skirmishes, they're not able to get in range of some of these larger coalition artillery units. And the coalition is happy to just keep pouring on the fire. We've actually reduced some units in here in this corps. We forced some retreats, generally disrupting the French flow as they try and hold the line here. They really haven't come under as much pressure as I thought they were going to. And it's taking the Austrians forever to get around this crossing that is being held by Kellerman. They don't want to make the attack across the bridge there because it's really bad odds. And so what they're going to try and do, they sent a cavalry unit up here to try and repair this trestle. If they can do that, they can just get around and compromise the positions. But it's taking a lot longer, many, many hours more than I think the coalition really wanted to be happening right now. They wanted to be pushing Poniatowski back towards the city, and that's simply not the case at this moment. It's some pretty good defensive play. The Russians, I may have misplayed the Russians here. They've got lots of artillery as well, and if they were able to bring that to bear, they would have a serious advantage. But I chose to make them come up this side of the Leipziger Ratholz, and that is proving to be a wrong move strategically. It's condensing all of their forces into this narrow approach to the outskirts of Leipzig. Now that Udinot's young guard have showed up, they've actually pushed back the attackers. Liechtenstein did have some pretty good combats in here, but again, he made some very short advances, and then suddenly there was a counterattack by the French guard. And that actually eliminated one of his infantry units and has pushed back the other one. And he was out of command this turn anyway. And we can't get Gyulai moving. Gyulai has a bulk of forces here that he could bring up to support the Russian attack, but he's just been unable to stay in command. And so now the French, what looked like a pretty gnarly situation here, under the command of Ney, who moved down from the north, are successfully pushing back this assault. And again, there's 10 points up for grabs here. The one thing that the Russians do have going for them is they managed to take control of this crossing here in some of these outskirts, these village outskirts. And so if they can take control of that hex there, they can actually get access to this road and then start moving their formation to the gates of Leipzig. So we're going to try and make that happen. There's a lot of big Russian units here that I think we'll be able to make the push with. We just got to hold on, take a little more time, and then Constantine should be able to compromise the French rear here, hopefully. But yeah, like I said, the French pushback has been superb. And then again, up here, without any sort of supply, basically all of these units being demoralized because of what happened with Blucher, they're not able to advance after combat. And so what we're seeing is a lot of very slow plotting moves. Now, there are some big guns under York right here, and he's just been firing away. He actually displaced several of the French 6th Corps units who were in defense here. They've kind of reset their position. And so he's just happy to keep firing. But that is only going to be sustainable for so long, especially when he's out of command, because this turn, Latour decided that he was going to make his move around the flank, and he launched a cavalry charge here. Now, this brigade managed to repulse the cavalry, but there were losses incurred on both sides in the close combat here. And they've got to watch out because Latour's cavalry can swing around down this way and block their lines of retreat. That will lead to eliminated units. We've also got more of the old guard getting into command here with Drouot. And as soon as they're in position, they can also make a move down this way. They've also positioned some big artillery pieces here within line of sight, if not range, of the coalition army. So coalition desperately hoping they get the card that gives them the baggage trains, because if they do that, they're going to get back into supply and they can make serious advances against the French. But right now, the French just kind of happy to hold on. They've got the worst of the artillery exchanges, especially this turn, because York's artillery fire against Mormont actually caused a capture. So this artillery fire forced oops, that was a mistake. Forced Marmont back. Let me fix that. And whenever you get a result on the artillery bombardment table on a leader, you have to check to see if they're captured. Well, of course, again, I rolled a 6. Every single leader capture opportunity, it feels like, has been not the way that the leaders would like it. So that's a pretty devastating blow as well. Now, Napoleon is here himself, and the French hand has the Napoleon card in it, so it's not going to be super debilitating. But again, you don't want to be losing a 4-command leader, corps leader here. And that's what happened under this burst of artillery. So the coalition getting the best of the artillery duels that are starting to unfold across the battlefield. But the French holding their ground very tough and whatnot. The one other thing I do want to point out up here is the alternate reinforcements that the coalition finally got this turn. Bülow's Prussians have come on, and in this scenario, they come on from the north. Now, they weren't at the battle historically, I don't believe, but because we got alternate reinforcements, they are coming on from the north, and that could provide a problem for the line Napoleon has set here if they're able to make breakthroughs. They're actually very good units, an 8 strength brigade, a 6 strength brigade. There's a couple more units in there. There's a ton of artillery under Bülow himself, and they're coming on here. The French have sent Souham's 3rd Corps to the north to try and block that, and they're kind of screening with Sebastiani's 2nd Cavalry over in this direction because there are victory points like Schoenfeld here, Tauca, yeah, I think it's Tauca here. So if Bulow is able to make a breakthrough, he can cause havoc in a defenseless region, essentially. So the French are just trying to hold that off and get the better of the army of Silesia before that becomes a problem. But it does change kind of the dynamics in the north. We've got half a scenario left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 turns left. And yeah, it's been kind of slow and plodding this particular day of battle, but we're going to keep it going. The other thing I should mention is that Wittgenstein's W Corps down here, they've basically been routed by Victor. They've lost a bunch of units. They're demoralized. They're basically just trying to hold this center where the French are kind of making a push, but they will not be combat effective for the rest of the scenario, it's looking like. So yeah, Kleist has a lot of work to do. Well, as if on cue, the card that the coalition drew for this turn to refill their hand is the baggage trains card. They need it so badly. However, it is only a 1 in 6 chance that the baggage trains even bother showing up. So we're going to make that roll right now, but they really need this really bad. I don't believe the French 7th Corps has arrived. Let me double check on that. Yeah, the French 7th Corps has not arrived under whoever their leader is. I'm not quite sure who the leader is, but they're not in. So there would normally be a -1 DRM to make it a little bit more likely that the baggage trains show up, but we're going to make the roll. This card can be played multiple times. Hopefully we get a 1. Let's do it. I got a 6. The baggage trains do not arrive, sadly. So it's going to be tough sledding up in the north for the coalition as we go. But I don't believe this card's victory point penalty is going to apply because the event didn't trigger. It's unclear based on the rules. It's if the event takes place, then you take the negative. It would be weird to get -1 VP every time you play this. It would be almost not worth playing. So we're going to say that the -1 VP doesn't happen unless the baggage trains do arrive. Wanted to zoom in on the action here west of Leipzig as the Russian Guard begin their assault on... let me get this out of here so you can see what's going on this town of Lindenau. Here, that is a chateau, so that is doubling the strength of the 2 infantry units inside of it. It's a 10-point hex. That's 14 times 2 is 28, and the Russians are managing to bring 29 strength points. That's about as good as you can do. I believe, 29 strength points against, thankfully this unit's not attacking across a creek, so we're about to make the assault here. This is going to be a big deal, and I wanted to show it. So we're going to roll it up. It's a 1-to-1 attack. We need some good fortune. It's a 4. That is going to result in a shock combat. So we're scaling the walls of this fortified town against the French. Let's see. And that is going to be, I believe, in the shock, there's 4 there, and there's 4 here. Yeah, so it's going to be a 4-to-4, which I believe is going to be a 1R. Yeah, it's a 1R. So each side is going to take a loss. And we're going to take the loss from here. And we'll take the loss from probably this artillery unit, because I'll have to double check that. I'll have to see if you can do that in shock or if it has to be from an infantry unit, but... Oh, and you know what? I might be illegally stacked here, so hold on. I might actually have to do it. Yeah, I believe the stacking limit is 2 units unless you have a leader. So both of these in the first guard, so it would have actually been a 1-to-1.5 attack, which is still the same result. Still would have been a shock, so I do have to flip over, which is painful. It's painful. But we did some losses there at the young guard, Udno's men. So the assault is going to continue. Turn over turn. We've pushed back some units here. And the Russians are just going to try and pour it on. Next is this key hex that I talked about shortly before this. Here, we've got, we've got 2 infantry units in a town, but it's only a village, so it's 9, 4.5, so 13.5, and we're coming in with 13 to 13.5. So it's a 1-to-1.5 attack. Not the greatest, but that's all we've got right now. That's a pretty good roll. That is going to be another shock result, so let's roll that up. Oh, okay. We got an advantage here. We got the Russians with an advantage. Okay, so that is going to be the best unit that we're going to want to use here probably is this artillery unit here. And I will double check the rules on this. But 4 versus 3, and then we add the shock combat modifiers to that. So that's going to be 6 versus 4. Sorry, yeah, 6 versus 4. And that is going to be a defender retreat result. And that's going to cause problems. No, they can retreat under Lindenau. The stacking limit is okay there, but that does mean that we can take the ground. We cannot take the ground. This cavalry unit's out of supply, so he cannot advance. The artillery units can never advance. And yeah, so they're going to get a chance to jump back in there, unfortunately. But the press is on. Well, maybe the best turn yet for the coalition here this afternoon. We finally managed to compromise Kellerman's position at this bridge, and a byproduct of that is it compromises Poniatowski's position as well, who is now pinned down against Kleist here, where these units are not allowed to disengage unless they have a card to play. This one will be, but these two are going to have to attack. And that's bad because Hamburg's Austrians finally managed to get across the river. They repaired the burned bridges. They've got a pontoon bridge here ready to deploy, probably in this direction. But in general, the Austrians are across. We've got some artillery and cavalry here under the east side coming in. The Poniatowski's baggage train, in fact, the whole baggage park for all of these operating forces is now in severe danger next turn, with Schwarzenberg being able to put everyone in command. And Augereau not having movement last turn means that the Austrians have achieved a real threatening logistics coup against all of the Liebervolkwitz front French units. On top of that, Klenau and Mirveld Austrians have managed to push these flanks back both with artillery fire and with some timely attacks. They've taken the village again this turn, and so they're really starting to carve out a dangerous salient for Victor and Murat down here. You can see kind of here's the line, here's the bulge that the French have as the Austrians come around this way. So even the Russians managed to displace and eliminate, with the help of some of Kleist's units, the unit in this chateau. So they've relieved the pressure a little bit down here, did Wittgenstein, and he just wants to hold fast, wait for these units to retreat, regroup, potentially get some units back reorganized. But it's starting to fall apart here. You can see the first cracks in the logistical puzzle here. And then up north, more artillery fire. We eliminated a cavalry unit under the command of the 6th Corps here with some enfilade fire from these two artillery units, these big artillery units. York still just trying to cause casualties with his artillery. It's the best he can really do. We had a foiled attack here with some of Latour's cavalry. So all in all, a really great turn for the coalition. The assaults here, they didn't actually make sorry about the blur. They didn't make the ground that the Russians wanted, but they're getting into a position where it's going to be very hard for the French to hold there over the course of lots of time. And so starting to see a little bit of the cracks showing. It's taken a while. If we can get Bülow activated next turn, that is going to be another great sort of point of leverage for the coalition. So the French, they really desperately need to start reducing their perimeter here and getting reformed because it's not looking good for them. Well, on the French side of the turn, we just had the French Guard launch a sally out of this village against Liechtenstein's beleaguered corps. Lyon's brigade did a cavalry charge out of the village, managed to get an overrun result on the stack, and then the close combat and the artillery shelling here with some light cav, some skirmishing, and some guns ended up eliminating Liechtenstein and his forces. And so that was quite an effective sally by the French, who have opened up some room here now and are going to force the Russians to extend their line, not be able to bring massive force to bear sort of around Lindenau. So a pretty good counterpunch there, and just wanted to show that to you. It's one of the first times in this system I've been able to execute a cavalry charge that resulted in an overrun and an elimination, which is cool to see. Hey, look at that. Another leader retreat check, another captured leader, of course. It's starting to look a lot like World War I out there. God, where has Kleist been this whole time? He is the hammer that the coalition have been missing. Now that he's reorganized and had those reinforcements come in under his command, he's been in command 3 straight turns. He brought this huge amount of artillery up over this crest, and he absolutely blew away a brigade that had just activated and was retreating towards Wachau from Victor's Second Corps. The destruction of that unit with this massive barrage, massive bombardment, put Victor's corps into demoralization mode, which is going to be very consequential as the French continue to try and pull back. The French did play a forced march card. It allowed them to move out of phase. They managed to get some of the infantry under Poniatowski unengaged from Kleist as well as they make their way back. It's going to be very narrow. They're trying to thread a needle through here with Kellerman covering for them as Hamburg and Schwarzenberg bring the Austrians up across the river. But you can see it starting to close now. Kleist coming this way, the Austrians coming this way, and Poniatowski's in a real bad spot. They had to relocate the artillery park. Klenau has finally managed to secure Liebert-Volkwitz for good this time as Murat is organizing the retreat. It's going to be pretty dicey. The Macdonald's 11th Corps has been getting hammered as well. Some Russian artillery and Austrian artillery here. They're completely disorganized. They've been forced back by the artillery shelling. And I'm thinking on the next turn for the French, if I can get Macdonald in command, I'm actually going to move him back probably to Zweinendorf here and stretch them out this way to make sure that, there's no further shenanigans by Hamburg and the Austrians. But really the only thing between this corps and Leipzig itself is Augereau's tiny force. So you're starting to see the shift in the battlefield now. You're starting to see the coalition build some momentum. And the absolute amount of numbers that they have against the French defenders, especially now that they've knocked them out of some of this hard terrain. The artillery for the French not as potent anymore because they don't have the lines of sight that they once did. The Russians up here made another assault on the town, did more losses as they tried to force their way through the walls. It's been a back and forth fight. They did push back some of the guard cavalry. The Russians did stake their guard units. So once per game, you're allowed to stake your guard units, which are these infantry units here that are assaulting the town. And you get a column shift for that. That's what allowed them to do another loss to the defenders. And so we're rapidly whittling them down with some of these huge Russian divisions under Constantine. As soon as we take that, I think many of the dominoes begin to fall around the city. Basically, it's going to be kind of untenable if suddenly there's a giant Russian force at the gates, or if the Austrians are knocking on the door as well. We didn't manage to get Bülow in command this turn, sadly. He's still kind of waiting around up there. That could be another X factor that plays into this. And then down here, at the most inopportune time, Latour's first cav ended up going into demoralized status because of a loss that one of his units that was under the command in the southern theater under Murat took. And so that's demoralized his corps. And that's just really bad timing because St. Priest, though he will be also demoralized because he's out of supply, did enter the game this turn, and he's marching up here. That's actually going to end up surrounding Latour and elements of the old guard. So stuff is shifting now here on the second day, and it's going to make that third and fourth day of battle real interesting as we move towards it. Well, Schwarzenberg's artillery in the counter-artillery fire phase of the French turn, there's batteries here, batteries here, batteries here, just blasted Kellerman off his horse. And I'll give you one guess as to what happened with Kellerman on that particular exchange of fire. That's right. A leader capture. It is just, if you are a commanding officer in this battle, you want to be taking off your uniform as quickly as possible. Well, we are on the last day turn of this particular scenario, and the French right now have absolutely zero answer to Prussian artillery all across the line, across the battlefield. Things have changed down here in the south, obviously, as the French begin their withdrawal. Poniatowski's under a march order to come back to this village here. He wants to stretch out a line this way. Augereau's been out of command for 4 or 5 hours. He's not been able to get his corps into a stronger defensive position. And Schwarzenberg and the Austrians, this was really the key to the whole thing. Once they crossed this river and started to envelop the French line, they had to pull back. And that has unlocked a lot of opportunity for the coalition to move into better positions, get stronger attacks going. The artillery fire has been withering. Just a lot of chaos on the French side as they scramble to try and recover. On top of that, and you can see Macdonald, he was in command this turn. He's kind of pulled back here to protect this flank. The French basically want to run a line along here. Lots of defensive opportunities in these villages. Gross Zweinendorf is another 5-point victory hex. They want to try and hold that as much as they can, but they've really got to be concerned here as in case the Austrians try and split the defense between Augereau's 6th and Poniatowski's 8th. The other thing that the French have really been struggling with is their hand of cards. So they've got an alternate reinforcements card, and they may play that this turn, but that's a huge victory point hit on a scenario where they're already going to be taking a ton of victory point hits with all the ground the Austrians have managed to capture, or the coalition. They've got the Napoleon card, and I'm thinking about playing that this turn. This gives Napoleon up here in the north, we'll go up there in a second, some opportunities to potentially counterattack. And then we've got this card, which I've desperately wanted to play, which is the exit to Wurzen. So this, if you roll, it's a 1 in 6 chance to change the French retreat hex from this down here, which the French really have no hope of getting to with the Russians kind of, and the Austrians for that matter, blocking the way. It changes it to out here. And if they can get that off, the French can begin to withdraw in an orderly fashion, leave the town of Leipzig behind and try and move that way. But the problem is it's a 1 in 6 chance, and I don't want to play it. Well, I might want to play it this turn just for the next scenario, but there's 2 more full days of fighting that we have to do. And I worry that if I succeed there, the French withdrawal from this direction is just going to hand the coalition the game. And there's no guarantee I draw this in the next scenario either, so we'll see. These cards right now, reinforcement arrives early and delay march confusion, don't do anything because there's no more reinforcements. So we've got a bunch of dead cards in our hand. Not a lot of great options. Definitely don't want to take this. Maybe it's time for the Napoleon card to be played. So that's kind of what the French are dealing with right now. Now up here, the Russians and the Young Guard and the regular French Guard have been grinding against each other for a couple of hours. The Russians slowly wearing down the Young Guard defenders in here. Udinot's had to switch positions of his units here. Nansuti's replacement has been trying to get some artillery fire on the Russians, but the Russian artillery left here is just keeping them at bay. And there's some heavy cavalry here who are really hungry to charge. Now, Constantine has kept some elements of this Russian corps who look like Prussians in reserve. This is a stack that's very powerful and can also get a column shift for combined arms if he chooses to deploy them. What I would really like to do is be able to get these guys out of here in advance. The problem is I don't have the correct units in position to do that. It's mostly artillery under Constantine, and they cannot advance after combat. So though I'm able to drive these units out, I'm not able to advance in there, and this guy is out of command, so he would be able to advance if I could get him in command, which will happen this turn. We're going to check supply this turn. He'll be in supply. A lot of the units that were out of supply for the coalition are going to be in supply, and conversely, a lot of French units that have been in supply for a while are going to be out of supply, which might start to collapse this. Now, up here, this is where most of the action took place in this 4 o'clock hour. The French, under Napoleon's command, ordered Marmont's replacement to have 6th Corps. Sixth Corps? It was Augereau's 9th, excuse me. Augereau's 9th, not 6th. He has ordered the 6th Corps, the purple striped units, to make a counterattack against York's Prussians. They've been mostly successful, and in this turn, actually, Drouot's old guard actually moved down and forced back some of the Prussian units. Didn't do any casualties, but they're trying desperately to push this part of the army back before St. Priest and Sacken can kind of envelop them. Sacken came on last turn. They're going to move up this way, and they want to get all the way here, which is only defended by a single brigade. So once this little thrust from Drouot hopefully drives them off, he can regroup and circle back. Because with... who is this? This is the 1st Cav. Yeah, Latour's 1st Cav, demoralized and out of command this turn. They're not really putting up much of a fight as these units move along. Now, again, the Silesian army of the coalition up here, out of supply. They don't have the ability to advance after combat, but their guns are wreaking havoc. The other part of 6th Corps, who's no longer on the map, tried to make an attack and surround this stack here. We had a cavalry division and an infantry division of the Russians, and they were in a really bad situation. But supporting fire from the Prussians managed to not only drive back this French counterattack, they actually managed to eliminate, first with a artillery barrage here, they managed to eliminate an artillery unit, and then the remaining artillery unit was forced to attack this stack at really bad odds. He was also eliminated in that attack. So the 6th Corps rapidly melting away. They're very close to being demoralized, and once that happens, that's a significant formation up here that is going to have been lost to essentially an out-of-supply army of the coalition, which is really not great. Bertrand's 4th Corps, which are the light blue ones, they're getting ready to fill in the gaps here if that's necessary. They were brought in as kind of a reserve. They're in position now, and we've also got elements of the Young Guard guarding the road to the northern part of Leipzig. So it's not as if the coalition's going to be able to slice through here, but there's a lot of casualties being taken by the French here, trying to get some sort of momentum going up here and take advantage of the fact that these units are out of supply. Things are going to change when the Russians manage to get into these positions, and they will be able to get there unless Drouot reconfigures. So we'll see what happens here. This is going to be really important for the next scenario. And finally, Bülow's reinforcements have come in, but he has been out of command for a couple hours as well. Maybe some confusion on directions. Who knows? Sakin's 3rd Corps has managed to get into a very strong defensive position here around the village of, what is that, Protitz? And whatever this one is that I can't see, and Kletzen. And so if Bülow wants to come help, he's going to have to fight through a lot of French. We've got also Sebastiani's 2nd Cav here, just keeping an eye on things, making sure they can respond to any threats. So that looks pretty contained, but we're in for definitely an interesting 3rd scenario to the campaign. Very excited as this starts to evolve. It ceases to become the stalemate it was, and you can see the French positions starting to change shape a little bit, and the coalition artillery has really been the difference so far. 2nd scenario finished, the Battle of Möchern and Wachau. Complete, and coalition made good progress there at the second half of the day. It looked like it was going to be pretty much of a pretty big stalemate and probably a French victory until these Austrians and Kleist got their shit together. Definitely the MVPs of the scenario. Möchern is in here, where Wittgenstein's W Corps has taken control of the town. Coalition victory down there. Möchern up here, French still hold it. And you can see that York's line has been driven back by the old guard, who then pivoted up to stop St. Priest and Sakin. French not doing so hot in here. They had an attack against this tiny stack that they rolled poorly on and had to retreat. Napoleon not able to motivate the troops. But it's going to be still tough sledding, I think, for the coalition in this particular part of the map going into the next scenario, which is going to be 2 full days of battle. And I'm not sure that the French can hold out. That's sort of my prediction. The assault on Lindenau was disengaged in the night turn. That is a forced effect that happens if you're not standing in a village or a chateau. So Constantine's K Corps pulled back, going to regroup, going to try it again, maybe take a different approach. Gyulai moving up the road here in support. He's probably going to want to come this way and let Constantine focus on the town, draw off some of those defenders. And yeah, this is where we are. You remember at the start of the scenario, we had the coalition kind of in this general direction. Advances all along have pushed the French back to this line here. So they're going to have to regroup, and we're going to go into the actual Battle of Leipzig scenarios, 2 full days. We'll talk about some of the conditions that the French have to be aware of there. It's going to be very difficult for them as they fight on 3 fronts, really 4 fronts, 1, 2, 3, 4, and try and pull out the victory. But you probably want to know what the score was. So it was a coalition strategic victory. That's huge. That means the coalition are going to be getting 3 bonus cards, so their hand's going to be 6 for the next scenario. That could be the pendulum that swings the tide for them. French are only going to have 3, and the French desperately need to get their retreat hex changed to over here very badly. Otherwise, I think that they are going to be utterly annihilated. At least in terms of victory points. But there you go. Thanks for sticking with me for this one. Kind of a long one, I know. There's a lot of counters on the map. The turns, especially early as I was having to maneuver a lot of these formations, was pretty laborious. But the next one should be a little bit quicker for the mere fact that most of the engagements are going to be, the engagement lines are going to stay in contact from the beginning, really. And when one side breaks or the other, that's going to probably spell the end of the battle. So I hope you join me for that. That's going to be the Battle of Leipzig proper. Now that we've done the prelude here, we're going to be moving to October 18th and 19th. And we'll have a full night sequence in that one as well. I hope you're enjoying this. Hope the story that this game is telling is compelling to you. And I'll see you in the next one.